Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Sean Mongold, and today we are going to be reviewing The Legend of Vox Machina. I got a sneak peek at this show, actually the first 6 episodes to be exact, and I'm going to share my thoughts from everything from the animation to the characters to the storyline, and just kind of have a nice little review here. Obviously, I want to give a shout out to my boy Kuya P. He hooked me up with this kind of sneak peek, obviously powered by Nerd to Rule the World. Check us out on social media and follow us, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And here we go. Hey critters, is it Thursday yet? For all my Critical Role fans, obviously that is the phrase to say, and that is the day that everything happens is a Thursday. Just to give everyone kind of a quick background on The Legend of Vox Machina. If you don't play D&D or listen to D&D podcasts, Critical Role is a D&D podcast show, kind of just a whole studio, I guess if you would now. And it was started by Matt Mercer. It's a bunch of voice actors, his voice acting friends. He's obviously a voice actor. And they get together and they play D&D. The first campaign is called Vox Machina. It's the name of their group that they play. For everyone who doesn't know, D&D is kind of one of the oldest RPG games, tabletop games around. Essentially what it is a bunch of people get together, a bunch of players. You have a bunch of players either from all the way from 2 to 8, 9, 10, however many people. And then there's one person who essentially is a storyteller. He is the game master, the dungeon master, essentially the referee and the narrator of the whole story and kind of making all the decisions. Not really the decisions, but just kind of the consequences of the decisions of the players. So the players, based on a player's handbook, they develop a character. They pick the fantasy race, the class, abilities, spells, weapons, all of it. And there's mechanics that figure out how everything works out. And then they essentially get together and they play, and they... sometimes they're serious and sometimes they're not. Critical Role is kind of in between. It's a very serious story. There is a whole storyline etched in. Matt Mercer created this whole world of Exandria, and it just kind of builds. And this whole world came about. And obviously, they had a Kickstarter to animate their first campaign, which is Vox Machina, and it blew up. And they got with Titmouse to do some animation, and here we are, Amazon Prime. It's about to be released, and I'm losing my shit. I've been waiting for this for so long. I can't tell you. I know so many people are going to be so excited about this. This is kind of once in a lifetime situation. I don't think it's ever been done where a D&D campaign gets just animated. And now we get instead of just listening, and it's fun listening to the story play out and watching the people, improvise and role play their characters. But just to see it animated and actually see the action go down is just, it's amazing, right? So that is just a quick down and dirty background on Critical Role and D&D, I guess, if you will. Obviously, if you want to know more, look up Critical Role, watch some of their shows, watch some of their one-shots if you don't want to get into the long campaign, because these campaigns get very, very long. Each episode's about 3 hours long, 4 hours long, Playing D&D, you just kind of get lost in it. Critical Role tries to keep it to 3 to 4 hours, and that's per episode. I think campaign 1 was about 120 episodes, 130. Can't really remember. Obviously they're on campaign 3 right now. Campaign 2 is the Mighty Nine shirt that I'm repping right now. So yeah, obviously Google Critical Role, Google D&D if you want to get into it. It's very, very fun. I highly recommend it. It lets you just kind of step outside of who you are and become someone else. So it's really, really fun. But anyway, we're going to jump into the actual animated series, The Legend of Vox Machina. And to start off, number 1, we are going to talk about the animation. Here we go. Animation, right? So let's start off with animation. Number 1, the animation studio that worked on this project is Titmouse. For some of you who do not know, we're going to do a little background on Titmouse. Titmouse is an animation studio that started back in the early 2000s. They've done quite a bit of things. They've worked on quite a bit of projects, things I've obviously have watched. You obviously probably have watched some of them as well. Some of those being Big Mouth, Mau Mau, Baby Shark's Big Show on Nickelodeon, Star Trek Lower Deck on Paramount Plus. The list goes on. They've been doing a lot of things, so I'm really, really glad that Critical Role got a chance to work with these guys. Also, kind of watching some of the other behind the scenes stuff and some of the Kickstarter stuff. Some of the animators for Titmouse actually backed the Kickstarter for the show, for Legend of Vox Machina, through Critical Role. So it's really nice to know that the animation team and the animators are invested into the story. They're invested into the whole project. They're invested into the outcome. They're invested into the final product, and it really, really shows. Just watching the first 6 episodes, and it being a first season, and it being the first of this kind of project of taking this whole story that's already played out, via on Twitch, via podcast, and animating it. It's astounding. Right. Some of the key parts that stuck out to me for animation, obviously, were the fights. When you have a bunch of action, obviously, like any anime fight scene, things are going crazy. And with this being the realm of D&D, you have multiple people, and this kind of gives credit to the DMs, the Dungeon Masters, who run these campaigns and these fight scenes, because you're juggling so many different things. You're juggling all your players. You have to kind of have a basic understanding of what your players can do, what their characters can do, what they may do, what spells they can cast, and then you also have to pretty much be the bad guy, be the NPCs that they're fighting, understand what they're doing, know what their HP is, know what their spells do, kind of put yourself in their psyche as well, of like what they would do. Would they be merciful if, one of the players is close to death or not? So it's all very, very interesting. So when you're animating such a big fight scene, it's always a big fight scene with this, right? Because all the characters are primarily together all the time. They split up a couple times, and obviously in D&D people split the party, which is never a good idea, right? And that's something soon you'll find out, if you haven't, or if you don't know. But anywho, yes, so the fight scenes, amazing. You have your casting, your casters. You have Scanlan, your bard. He's casting spells. He's casting Bigby's hand, which is a giant spectral hand, which I'm sure everyone's going to love when they see it finally animated, because it's such a big part of the show. Scanlan's Bigby's hand. It's so much fun. Everything that you want to see is going to be, and just even the first 6 episodes. I mean, obviously I haven't seen the full season yet, but just the first 6 episodes, you get so much cool shit. Everything you want to see animated gets animated. You want dragons? spoiler, you get a dragon, and it's very, very incredible. I really have no critiques on it. Obviously, I think as with everything, with animation, it evolves from season to season. Certain things get, changed a little bit, polished a little bit, everything like that. So things I think will change as the seasons go on, as they go into more arcs. But yeah, I think that Titmouse just hit it out the ballpark with this. They've definitely put the time and thought and just just everything and their heart into it. They're completely invested into it. I appreciate everything they did, and I can't wait to watch the rest of it. Moving on to part two of my review, we're going to be breaking down the story of the first season of The Legends of Vox Machina. Obviously, I only watched the first 6 episodes, but at the same time, I'm a fan of Critical Role. I've watched and listened to every single campaign. If you're a fan of Critical Role, you know exactly what the story is. You know how everything breaks down. It's just an adventure to see it animated, right? And obviously, this first season, oddly enough, is the Briarwood arc, which is not the first arc of Campaign 1. So obviously, this skips over Craghammer and the Underdark and all that jazz, and skips right to Percy's backstory. So Percy is a character within Critical Role, within Vox Machina. His name is Percival Frederickstein van Musel Kowalski de Rollo III. Such a mouthful. Percy for short. Percy de Rollo III. And within D&D, when people create their characters, they always kind of have a backstory, a background, and they usually work with the DM, the Dungeon Master, to kind of flesh out a backstory. And it sometimes plays out into your campaign. And this is exactly what happened. This is solely Percy's backstory. And it just, the story is dark. Obviously, for people who listen to Critical Role, it gets dark. It's a very dark backstory, and it only gets darker as it goes on. So, for those of you who are wondering, this is not, a Nickelodeon cartoon, obviously. Titmouse, animated Big Mouth. You know what I mean? Like, this is an Adult Swim, our like HBO Max, Amazon Prime, the boys level of entertainment. So it is not for children, obviously. And the story, like I said, it's very, it gets you a little bit. There's a couple times, even though I knew what's going on, that it gets to your emotions. So, I mean, it's really, really hard to do a review on the story without going into spoiler territory. But, all I can say is that, I don't know who wrote the script. I know someone separate kind of wrote the script and the story, just to kind of condense everything, because the Briarwood arc was I think it was about 15 episodes. And like I said before, each episode's about 3-4 hours of play. So they condense it all into a season. And I can also give you a heads up that the first 2 episodes, have nothing to do with the Briarwood arc. It kind of does something that's a little pre-stream. So for those who don't know what that means, so pre-stream essentially before Critical Role got onto Twitch and started recording all their gameplay, they played at home amongst themselves, and they played for quite a bit of time. So part of that story plays out in the first 2 episodes, which I thought was very, very interesting, because it's it's a story of the pre-stream that they mention quite a bit throughout the campaign. but you never really knew what happened. So it's really, really interesting to see that play out in the first 2 episodes. So I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it's really, really entertaining, and it's really, really fun. And it really kind of drives home the message of D&D. So, I mean, D&D, it's a group of bandits, misfits, whatever, what have you, wannabes, old forgotten nobles, wannabe nobles who run away, and they get together and they form a group, and they become mercenaries, or they do odds ends. They try to make money, or they try to start a band or whatever, and it's it's just craziness incarnate. So definitely, the story is definitely true to the nature of Critical Role. The story is definitely true to just D&D, and its overarching glory. So I think people who are coming into this without knowing what Critical Role is, obviously you will pick up on the story. It's easy to pick up on. Obviously, there's a lot of not really foreshadowing, but the characters definitely seem very standoffish, very, very closed, and that's really how the players in Critical Role played their character. There's a lot of time when people play their character, they're very, very secluded. They don't want to give too much of their backstory away. They're ominous, they're mysterious. They play them this way, for more suspense, or what have you. So, this is actually how it played out in Critical Role. Like Percy, just give you a heads up, Percy doesn't divulge his backstory to the rest of the group, even though they've been a group for quite some time, doing things and doing missions and even living together, in their keep. And that's exactly how Taliesin Jaffe played Percy in Critical Role. Is he kept him very, very mysterious, very, very to himself, and then over time, as events start playing out, he starts having to eventually divulge his backstory and tell the group what actually happened, so that they have an understanding. You know what I mean? The shit goes down. So it's all very, very interesting, and I can't wait to see the remainder of the season, just to watch everything play out. Obviously, I know what happens, but it's cool to see if they make little changes to the story. Obviously, there's a couple small changes here and there, obviously, from their gameplay of Critical Role to the show. They have to cut a couple things out. They have to shorten, the fights. They have to shorten some things, but you still get like all the fun moments, all the ridiculous moments, all the hijinks, and it's so much fun. There's especially one moment. I don't like this is not a spoiler, but in D&D, when you typically are trying to sneak into a place or something like that, you come up on a door, and the DM makes you roll for sleight of hand to pick the lock on the door, and in Critical Role, there was this one door that they were trying to break into. I think it was on a mansion or something like that, and they could not roll high enough, and I think they spent about like 30-40 minutes of actual real time, like our time, real time, IRL time, trying to get through this door. And come to find out, the door was unlocked the whole time, and they could have just opened it. And that plays out in the Legend of Vox Machina. There's at one point the characters at a door and they're trying to pick it open, and like shit keeps breaking. They can't get it open. Someone tries to crawl through a window and they fall out because they miss a athletic check. So it's really, really cool to see how they animated failed ability checks. Obviously failed ability checks within the game of D&D. You roll a dice. You add your modifier on whether you're, agile enough, you have dexterity, you add that modifier to your roll, and, the DM kind of has in his head, like, okay, they have to beat X number to successfully do this thing. And they just kept failing. And when they fail rolls, sometimes, it could be life-threatening. Your whole party could be wiped out, if you failed something, if you're not stealthy enough, you're not agile enough. So it was really, really fun just to see how they interpreted people's failure of ability checks. And like I said, I can't wait to see what else happens. So bringing it around to number three, the third part of my review, we're going to break down the characters. So to do this, I'm just going to go down and list every single character that you will be introduced to or reintroduced to if you're a fan of Critical Role. So obviously there is Scanlan, the Gnome Bard, there is Grog Stonejaw, the Goliath Barbarian, there is Keyleth of the Arashari, the Elven Druid. There is Vex and Vax. They are the twin half-elves. Vex is the female hunter with her bear Trinket, which you also get to see in the show, and all of Trinket's glory. The best buddy ever. And he also is armored out, which is great. Vax is her twin brother, who is the rogue of the group. Then you have Pike, Trickfoot. She is the gnome cleric of Sarenrae. And then you have Percy, obviously, which this whole story and whole arc is revolved around. And he is a fighter, subclass gunslinger, human. And I believe that's everybody. Right? I didn't miss anyone. Okay, I don't think I missed anybody. So, obviously, all these people are played by voice actors. So the voice acting is obviously great in the show. I mean, it's created by voice actors. They're their own voice directors. They're their own casting director. And they have other, they have other friends who come in and play some of the NPCs. Typically, Matt Mercer plays all the NPCs because he's a dungeon master. But he only plays a handful of them in Legend of Vox Machina. And then they kind of reach out to other friends. There's, a couple handful, like Stephanie Beatrice. Beatrice is obviously in it. She was Mirabelle and Encanto. She's, Rosa and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And she comes in and she plays Lady Kima in Critical Role, which is great. Kyrie Payton. I love Kyrie Payton. He's done so many voices. He's an amazing person. I've met him. Just a very genuine person. Love him to death. He plays Uriel, who's kind of the king of Iman, or king, whatever the hell it is. But so there's a bunch of voice actors who come in and play. So breaking down the characters, obviously, the dynamic that I was most looking forward to is obviously Grog and Scanlan. I mean, between Travis and Sam's just their chemistry together is just so great. It's so funny. It's so entertaining. And that was what I was looking forward to the most, and I was not disappointed. It's just one of these things. You have, Grog, who's this barbarian, just brute who is a simpleton. He's very I want to drink and kill things. He's the typical murder hobo. Just wants to swing his axe around and kill shit. But at the same time, he says some things that are so profound it makes the whole group be like, is he right? Like, whoa, Grog is right? Like, so it's really fun just to see the dynamic between Grog and Scanlan, because Scanlan is, the typical bard. He's a horn dog, makes penis jokes, just does ridiculous things, he distracts people by stripping down butt ass naked, and Sam's mind is just so wild, and it's just created so many moments in Critical Role that are so ridiculous, and now they get to be animated, so it's just that much more fun to relive those moments. Like I said, there's just so many good moments between those two, and it's just chef's kiss. Vex and Vax, the twins, they're kind of their dynamic is, they're twins, obviously. They're kind of loners. They've always been on their own, and it's kind of always kind of known about, like, they're kind of on the edge of being on the group. They're kind of like, oh, do we really need to be with this group? Like, it's just been us. Like, we can still survive just us. And it's kind of like this weird dynamic of them going back and forth of, like, we need this group. We don't need this group. We just need each other. And it's really cool to see how Laura and Liam kind of play this twin brother sister role, and it does play out into the show a lot. Because Vex is this kind of, she is this very demanding, very very frugal individual. She's always looking to barter people down on price, and she's also very very demanding of a plan. She very much wants to be the leader and tries to take a lead on a lot of things, and tries to be this very very straight to the point planner. And Vax very much wants to follow his sister, but Vax is more, he's going through this kind of motion of, he likes this group. He's made very, very deep connections with the group, whereas, Vex, not so much. And also Vax, starts to, there's little hints of him having a thing with Keyleth, who is a druid, which obviously we know what happens there. For people who watch Critical Role, but there's little hints of them kind of flirting and being bashful, and things of that nature. So that dynamic plays out really, really well in the show, I think. And they have a couple of good moments, which are very, very interesting. Moving on here, we'll jump right to Keyleth. Keyleth is played by Marisha Ray, Matt's wife, and I love Keyleth. Keyleth is like the airhead of the group, and she goes through a lot of character development. Just even within the 6 episodes, she's the druid who is trying to impress her family and be this great druidic master. Obviously, they'll go into it in the story more of her Aramante and what she has to accomplish. But, she's very, very down on herself in the beginning, like not knowing whether or not she can cast certain spells, not knowing if she can save the group or help the group or be of importance. So it's a real struggle. And obviously, her relationship with Vax and the flirting gets back to it. So it's really interesting. There's also another point in time where Percy divulges his backstory to the group, and obviously is reluctant to do it. And then there's a nice little moment where Keyleth and Percy are having a conversation, and Keyleth kind of explains, like, hey, I understand why you don't want to talk about your family. Like, I'm going through this, and I don't know if I can ever see my family, because I don't know if I can look them in the face, because they want me to complete this, what seems like impossible task, and I can't go back until I'm done. And so it kind of opens up this spectrum of them being able, to have a relationship, of partners. So it was really interesting just to see, like, the team ups and the different connections that people have. And that's literally in Critical Role. When you're playing D&D, you as a player, you can be like, hey, my character wants to pull so-and-so aside and have a conversation, and then you role play it out, and you actually have, like, you role play a full emotional, sequence out with that person. So it's really, really, nice to see it, obviously animated, but it's nice to see that wasn't lost in the animation process. Obviously, let's see, who else is next? You got Aldan, we got Vexvax, you got Scanlan, you got Grog. Pikey. So Pike comes in, um, and same thing as Keyleth. Pike is very down on herself, doesn't know if she can really be of assistance to the group or help the group. She also kind of has an inner turmoil with her religion, which is essentially how clerics get their power, is through blessings through their deity. Hers is Saren Ray. And she starts to doubt whether or not Saren Ray is happy with her, is mad at her. She all of a sudden can't cast spells, and something happens, and it becomes a big ordeal. And obviously, it plays out later, and even into the episodes I haven't seen yet. But Pike's a great character. Pike is. It's really cool to see Pike's relationship with Grog, because Grog and Pike were friends before Vox Machina was even started. So it's nice to see that they keep these little hints, and there's a bunch of emotional conversations that pop up, which tug at your heartstrings a little bit. And it's just overall very, very nice to see. So I was really thoroughly happy with how they portrayed all the characters. Obviously, the people who created the characters and role played the characters for years were involved. So of course it was going to translate very, very well. So obviously I'm very, very invested in this show. I'm very invested in Critical Role. I'm very invested in this show, The Legend of Vox Machina. Right. So, if you're interested, please check it out as soon as you can. Right when it's dropping weekly. Watch it. Doing a little wrap up here. That was my review of The Legend of Vox Machina. I watched through the 6 episodes as soon as I had access to it. I was enthralled the whole time. Like I said, the fight scenes, there's a fight scene almost every episode. It's kind of how it is in D&D. You typically have around, some kind of combat per session of your campaign. So it keeps you going. The characters just drag you in, draw you in, and you develop these connections with these people, with these characters. And they do a really, really good job. This wasn't just thought up by one person. This was a culmination of people playing a game. Like I said before, this is just such an interesting project. Just an interesting, just amalgam of all these different moving parts. It's 8 different minds, 7 different minds coming together and creating the story, which is why I love D&D. So having it animated truly, truly, truly is just so amazing. Truly a blessing, in disguise there. Thank you to everyone who funded the Kickstarter. Thank you to everyone who watches Critical Role. Thank you to the cast of Critical Role. Thank you to the animators at Titmouse. Thank you to my boy Kuya P for hooking me up with this, access to watching this, because this is something I've been waiting for so long. Thank you to Nerds Rule the World. By all means, please, if you like the review, please share it, like, subscribe, follow Nerds Rule the World on all social media, and please, please, please check this show out. I'm probably going to be coming back and maybe doing an episodic review, as the episodes come out weekly, obviously. So please check that out. If you enjoyed my review, please stick around. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, is it Thursday yet? Peace, guys.